The mirror reflected a perfect lie. Victoria Morgan adjusted her French lace veil for the 10th time in 5 minutes, her fingers trembling slightly. 18 years old. 18 years since she'd last seen her mother, since she'd slept in her own bed, since she'd been allowed to make a single choice about her own life. And now, in a $15,000 dress she hadn't chosen, she was about to marry a man whose face she'd never seen. "It's time, Miss Victoria." Mrs. Henderson's voice was professional, distant. 8 years as her only company at St. Catherine's boarding school, and the woman had never shown a shred of real emotion. "The car is waiting." Victoria looked at her reflection one last time. Blonde hair perfectly pinned in an elaborate updo that had taken 3 hours to create. Flawless makeup applied by a team that treated her face like a museum canvas. A dress that weighed as much as her anxiety. She looked like a magazine bride. She felt like prize cattle heading to auction. The St. Regis Hotel in New York was unrecognizable, transformed into a fairy tale setting, the kind of fairy tale where the princess is traded for territories in business deals. Victoria vaguely recognized some faces as she was guided down the aisle. Uncles who hadn't visited since she was 10. Cousins who probably didn't even remember her name. Her mother sat in the front row, but she might as well have been miles away by how carefully she avoided Victoria's gaze. And then, at the altar, there he was, William Giordano. Victoria had imagined this moment 1,000 times during sleepless nights in the dormitory. She'd created versions of him in her mind, monster, prince, everything in between. Reality was complicated. He was tall, dark hair perfectly styled, wearing a suit that probably cost more than a car. Handsome in a way that would seem dangerous if not for the expression of complete indifference on his face as she approached. William looked at her exactly once. It felt like being assessed and deemed irrelevant in the same second. The ceremony was quick, clinical. The priest spoke words about union and sacred bonds while Victoria signed documents that looked more like corporate contracts than marriage certificates. There were clauses, expectations, obligations, a child. The contract required a child, and it specified in cold legal language that the bride must be a virgin. Victoria had spent 8 years at a boarding school where she could barely leave the gates. Virginity hadn't exactly been a choice. It had been her only option. "You may kiss the bride," the priest announced. William turned to her for the second time. His eyes were dark green, impossible to read. He leaned in, pressed his lips against hers for exactly 5 seconds, she counted, and pulled away before she could even process the contact. The reception was worse. 300 people celebrating a union that felt more like a corporate merger than a marriage. Victoria smiled until her jaw ached, greeted people whose names she didn't know, accepted congratulations that rang hollow. William was on the other side of the ballroom, surrounded by men in expensive suits discussing business. He didn't look in her direction once. "You look beautiful, darling." Her mother finally approached, but there was something strange in her eyes. Guilt, perhaps, or just relief at having fulfilled her part of the deal. "Mom, everything will be fine." The tone was of someone trying to convince herself. "The Giordano family is respectable. William will take care of you." Take care of. As if Victoria were a pet. A responsibility. The night dragged on interminably. When it was finally time to leave, for the Giordano mansion in Long Island, her new home that she'd never seen, Victoria was exhausted from smiling, from pretending, from existing as decoration. The car was absurdly luxurious. William sat on the other side, checking his phone. "So," Victoria began, her voice sounding strange after hours of empty conversations, "maybe we should. The maids have already prepared your quarters." He didn't even look up from his phone. "You have a walk-in closet, private bathroom, an office if you need it. You shouldn't lack for anything." I was thinking more about talking, getting to know each other. Now he looked at her, and there was something so cold in that expression that Victoria felt a chill. "Victoria, let's be clear about one thing. This is a business arrangement. You have your role. I have mine. We'll fulfill the contract terms as necessary. But don't delude yourself into thinking this is something it's not. The words were like slaps. The contract terms, she repeated, her voice firmer than she expected. You mean the part where I'm treated like a contracted incubator? For the first time, something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, as if he didn't expect her to have opinions about the situation. It's an arranged marriage. You've known this forever. Knowing and accepting are different things. And yet you came. He returned to his phone. So apparently you accepted. Victoria had no answer to that, because he was right. She had come. She'd worn the damn dress, said the words, signed the papers. What else could she have done? The mansion was as imposing as it was intimidating, a stone structure that looked more like a fortress than a home. Guards at the gates, cameras at every angle, security that protected or imprisoned, depending on perspective. Your quarters are in the East Wing, William informed her as they entered the main hall. Mine are in the West. He started up the marble staircase, then stopped, looking back with an unreadable expression. Come, I'll show you where it is. Victoria followed him through endless corridors, her wedding dress dragging on the polished floor. The East Wing was luxurious in an almost oppressive way. Expensive art on the walls, furniture that looked museum quality, everything perfectly coordinated and completely impersonal. William opened a double door, revealing a suite that was larger than the entire dormitory where Victoria had spent the last 8 years. This is your room. He entered, and for the first time that night, he seemed to actually look at her. You must be tired. I am. The admission came out before she could censor it. Something changed in his eyes. For one brief moment, the mask of indifference slipped, and Victoria saw... What? Recognition? Some genuine human emotion? Sit down, he said, his voice softer. Let me help with this. Victoria blinked, confused as he approached. With surprising care, William began removing the elaborate pins from her hair, one by one. His fingers were gentle, almost reverent. This must have been hurting for hours, he murmured. It had been. Victoria hadn't even realized how much until she felt the relief of her hair finally loose, falling in waves over her shoulders. Thank you, she whispered. William cupped her face in his hands, leaning in to look into her eyes. This time, when he kissed her, it was completely different from the clinical kiss at the altar. It was slow, exploratory, as if he had all the time in the world. Victoria found herself responding, her heart racing. Victoria. Her name sounded different in his voice now, less like an inventory item and more like a person. You're my wife. It wasn't a question, but it also wasn't the cold statement from before. What happened next was a contradiction Victoria would never forget. William was surprisingly careful, considerate even. He removed her dress with patience, kissed every inch of exposed skin as if she were precious, murmured soft words in Italian that she didn't understand but that sounded like promises. When it finally happened, when the contract terms were technically fulfilled, it hurt less than Victoria expected. Not because it was painless, but because William held her hand, wiped away her silent tears, waited when she needed him to wait. For one fleeting moment, lying in his arms afterward, feeling her heartbeat slow, Victoria almost believed that maybe, just maybe, this could become something real. Then William got up. I need to make some calls, he said, already reaching for his clothes. His voice was back to that professional, distant tone, as if the last 30 minutes hadn't happened. Victoria pulled the sheet up, suddenly very conscious of her nakedness. Now, it's almost 2 a.m. International business, different time zones. He was dressing with mechanical efficiency, not looking at her. Sleep. You must be exhausted. William. Good night, Victoria. And then he was gone. Just gone. Victoria lay there, alone in an enormous bed in a strange room, her body still aching, her heart confused by emotional whiplash. Had the gentleness been real, or just part of the role he was playing? A necessary performance to fulfill the contract terms without legal complications? She didn't know. And as she stared at the ornate ceiling of this gilded prison, hearing only silence where there should be, what? Conversation? Connection? Anything besides emptiness? Victoria realized the terrible truth. The loneliness of St. Catherine's boarding school hadn't been preparation. It had been prediction. The only difference was that now she had a ring on her finger and the word wife attached to her name. But she was just as alone as she'd always been. Maybe even more so. Victoria woke to sunlight streaming through windows she didn't remember opening. For a disorienting moment she forgot where she was. Then reality crashed back. The wedding, the contract. William's careful hands followed by his cold exit. She was alone in a bed big enough for 4 people wearing nothing, in a house that felt more like a museum than a home. Her wedding dress lay crumpled on the floor like a discarded costume. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Mrs. Giordano? A woman's voice, professional but warm. May I come in? Mrs. Giordano. The name felt foreign, like borrowed clothes that didn't fit right. Yes, Victoria managed, pulling the sheet higher. A woman in her 50s entered carrying a tray. She had kind eyes and graying hair pulled into a neat bun. I'm Maria, the head housekeeper. I brought you breakfast. Mr. Giordano thought you might prefer to eat in your room this morning. Mr. Giordano thought, as if he knew anything about her preferences. Thank you. Victoria accepted the tray mechanically. Coffee, fruit, pastries that looked professionally made. Everything perfect and impersonal. Where is my husband? The word tasted strange. He left for the office around 6. Maria began gathering the wedding dress with practiced efficiency. He typically works 16-hour days, sometimes doesn't come home at all. Of course he did. I've laid out some clothes in your closet, Maria continued, gesturing to the enormous walk-in. Your measurements were provided in advance. If anything doesn't fit or isn't to your taste, just let me know. We can have new things brought in immediately. Victoria walked into the closet and stopped short. It was filled. Designer labels, perfectly organized by color and season. Hundreds of items she'd never chosen, never touched, never wanted. A wardrobe for a woman who didn't exist yet. There's also a fully stocked bathroom, a home gym down the hall, and a library on the 2nd floor if you enjoy reading, Maria offered. The grounds are extensive. You're welcome to explore, though security will accompany you if you leave the immediate garden area. Security? Of course. And if I want to leave? Go into the city? Something flickered in Maria's expression. Pity, maybe. You'll need to coordinate with Mr. Giordano's security team. For your safety, of course. Of course. Victoria spent the morning exploring her prison. The mansion was stunning. All marble floors, crystal chandeliers, artwork that probably cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. But it was also eerily quiet, like a high-end hotel between guests. She found the library, at least. Floor-to-ceiling books, many of them first editions kept behind glass. Beautiful and completely untouchable, like everything else here. Her phone, the new one that had appeared on her nightstand with a note, your new number. Your old one has been disconnected. W buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Doctor's appointment scheduled for 2 p.m. Car will pick you up at 1:45. Bring identification. No greeting, no signature, just instructions. Victoria stared at it, something hot and angry building in her chest. She typed back, "What kind of appointment?" The response came immediately. Standard post-wedding medical examination, required per contract clause 7.3. She wanted to throw the phone. Instead, she typed, "And if I refuse?" This time the response took longer. When it came, it was from a different number, Williams, she assumed. Don't be difficult, Victoria. It's a routine checkup. The doctor is female and comes highly recommended. By whom? Your lawyers? No response. The car arrived exactly at 1:45. The driver was silent, professional, drove like he'd made this route 1,000 times. They ended up at a private medical practice in Manhattan. the kind with no waiting room, just a receptionist who clearly knew exactly who Victoria was. The doctor, Dr. Patricia Chen, was indeed female and surprisingly warm. She explained everything before doing it, asked permission, treated Victoria like a person rather than a commodity. "You're healthy," Dr. Chen said after the examination. "Everything looks good. Any questions?" Victoria had about 1,000,000 questions, but only one that mattered. "The blood test, what were you testing for?" "Standard panels, STDs, blood type, general health markers." Dr. Chen's voice was gentle. "And pregnancy, though it's too early for that to show up yet. That typically takes about 2 weeks." "Right. The contract requirement." Dr. Chen closed her tablet, her expression careful. "Victoria, I know the circumstances of your marriage are unconventional, but I want you to know that anything you tell me is confidential. If you're not comfortable with something, if you feel unsafe, you can tell me." The kindness almost broke her. "I'm fine," Victoria lied. "Just adjusting." Back at the mansion, she found a note from Maria. "Mr. Giordano will be dining at home tonight. Dinner is at 8 p.m. in the formal dining room." Victoria almost laughed. Formal dining room. Of course. She dressed carefully, one of the designer dresses from the closet, simple makeup, hair down. If this was a performance, she'd play her part. The dining room could seat 20 easily. William sat at the head of the table, already there when she arrived, reviewing documents while he ate. "You're late," he said without looking up. "Dinner started at 8. It was 8:03. "I wasn't aware I was on a factory schedule," Victoria replied, sitting at the chair to his right, the only other place setting. Now he looked at her, surprise flickering across his features. "I prefer punctuality. I prefer being treated like a person rather than an employee." For a long moment they stared at each other. Then, incredibly, William almost smiled. It was gone so fast Victoria thought she might have imagined it. "How was the doctor?" he asked, setting his papers aside. "Clinical, efficient, very thorough in checking that your investment is sound." Victoria: "No, it's fine, I understand. This is business. You've been very clear about that." She picked at her food, some elaborate dish she couldn't even name. "Tell me, do you schedule all your business acquisitions for medical examinations within 24 hours? Or am I special?" "You're angry." "I'm realistic. There's a difference." William set down his fork, giving her his full attention for the first time since the previous night. "What do you want from me?" The question caught her off guard. "I don't know. Basic human decency? Acknowledgement that I exist beyond my function in producing an heir?" "You exist." "Do I? Because from where I'm sitting, I'm just another asset. Expensive dress, expensive doctor, expensive cage." She gestured at the opulent room. "All very high quality, I'm sure, but still a cage." Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "You think this is a cage? You have everything you could possibly need. Except choice, except freedom, except any say in my own life. You agreed to this marriage." "Did I?" Victoria leaned forward. "Tell me, William, when exactly did I agree?" "When I was 10 years old and my parents signed a contract. When I spent 8 years in isolation being prepared for this role. When was the moment I actually had a choice?" The silence stretched between them, heavy with truths neither wanted to acknowledge. Finally, William stood. "I have work to do." "Of course you do." He paused at the doorway, his back to her. "The appointment results will take a few days. Dr. Chen will call you directly." And then he was gone again, leaving Victoria alone in a dining room built for 20, surrounded by crystal and china, and absolutely nothing that mattered. She looked down at her plate, at food she couldn't taste, in a house that wasn't home, wearing a name that didn't feel like hers. Mrs. Victoria Giordano. 24 hours married, and she'd never felt more alone in her life. 3 weeks passed like a slow-motion car crash. Victoria learned the rhythm of her new life quickly. Wake up alone. Eat breakfast alone. Spend days in a house full of staff who were paid to be polite but not to be friends. Wait for a husband who treated home like a hotel he occasionally checked into. William was a ghost. He left before sunrise, returned after midnight if he came home at all. They crossed paths maybe twice a week, always briefly, always with the careful distance of strangers sharing an elevator. Except they weren't strangers. They were married. And Victoria was pregnant. Dr. Chen had called 2 days ago with results that Victoria had expected, but somehow still wasn't prepared for. One night. One carefully executed contract obligation, and now there was a cluster of cells inside her that would become a person. The heir the Giordano family had paid for. She hadn't told William yet. Partly because she barely saw him. Mostly because she didn't know how to tell a man who treated her like furniture that she was carrying his child. Victoria stood in the mansion's garden, the one place she could go without security hovering, and stared at her phone. She'd typed and deleted 17 different messages trying to tell him, "We need to talk." Too ominous. The test came back positive. Too clinical. "Congratulations, you got what you paid for." Too bitter, even if it was true. She finally settled on, "I have news. When can we talk?" The response came 3 hours later. "Busy week. Important client dinner Thursday. You should attend. Car at 6:30. Not would you like to come? Not please join me. Just instructions, like everything else." Victoria threw her phone into the hedge. Maria found it 20 minutes later. Thursday arrived with all the enthusiasm of a root canal. Victoria dressed in one of the designer outfits, a midnight blue dress that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe at boarding school. She looked elegant, expensive, exactly like a mafia wife should look. She felt like a performing seal. The restaurant was the kind that didn't have prices on the menu and required reservations months in advance. William was already there, sitting with 3 men in suits that screamed money and danger in equal measure. He stood when she arrived, and for half a second, something flickered in his eyes. Appreciation? Surprise? It was gone too fast to identify. "Gentlemen, my wife, Victoria." His hand settled on her lower back, proprietary. "Victoria, this is Marco De Luca, Anthony Russo, and Vincent Chen. They're expanding their operations on the West Coast." The men greeted her with the particular brand of old-world courtesy that barely masked assessment. Victoria could see them calculating how young she was, how useful she might be, whether she knew anything worth knowing. She smiled and said nothing. Dinner was an education in how business really worked. The conversation danced around topics, never landing directly on anything concrete. Shipping routes that were obviously about more than cargo ships. Labor disputes that had nothing to do with unions. Real estate investments in neighborhoods where property values fluctuated based on who controlled the streets. Victoria watched William work. He was good at this. The subtle nods, the careful questions, the way he could make a threat sound like a suggestion and an offer sound like a favor. He wasn't the cold, distant man she knew at home. Here, he was sharp, engaging, almost charismatic. It was like watching a completely different person. "Your wife is quiet," Marco observed, swirling his wine. "Smart girl." "Victoria knows the value of listening," William replied smoothly. "Victoria is sitting right here and can speak for herself," she thought but didn't say. "My daughter's about your age," Vincent added. 20, 21? 18, Victoria corrected and saw William tense slightly beside her. "Ah." Vincent's expression shifted, something uncomfortable passing through his eyes. "Young. Very young." The conversation moved on, but the damage was done. Victoria could see it in how the men looked at her now. Not as a wife, but as what she actually was. A teenager in an arranged marriage with a man 10 years older. A business transaction dressed up in a wedding gown. On the drive home, William was silent. Not the usual distant silence, but something heavier. Angry, maybe. "You didn't need to mention your age," he finally said. "I didn't realize my actual age was classified information." "It's not, it's just..." He cut himself off, jaw tight. Just what? Inconvenient? Makes the transaction look bad? Victoria turned to face him in the back of the town car. God forbid anyone remember that you married someone barely legal. I didn't choose this arrangement. Neither did I. The words exploded out of her. But at least you gotta walk around for 28 years making your own decisions before your family cashed you in. I got 10 years. 10 years of being a regular kid and then 8 years in a boarding school being prepared like livestock. William looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something crack in his carefully maintained facade. You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to marry a stranger and have dinner conversations about expanding territory while my wife sits there looking like she's being tortured? Then why did you agree? Because saying no wasn't an option. His voice rose, then dropped immediately, controlled again. My father arranged this before he died. It's bound up in alliances, territories, debts that go back decades. Walking away would have meant war. People would have died. So you sacrificed me instead. I sacrificed both of us. The car pulled up to the mansion. William got out immediately, but Victoria caught his arm before he could disappear into the house. I'm pregnant. He froze. Completely, utterly froze. When he turned back to her, his face was unreadable. You're sure? Dr. Chen called 2 days ago. Blood test confirmed it. William ran a hand through his hair, the most uncontrolled gesture she'd ever seen from him. 2 days ago. You waited 2 days to tell me. You were busy. You're always busy. Victoria wrapped her arms around herself. And honestly, I didn't know how to tell you that the contract obligation has been fulfilled ahead of schedule. Don't. His voice was sharp. Don't reduce this to that. Why not? That's what it is, isn't it? I've done my job. Produced the heir. Soon I'll be completely irrelevant except as a vessel. Victoria? When's the next client dinner you need me to dress up for? She was so tired suddenly, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with pregnancy. I should mark my calendar. Put on my performing wife costume. Sit quietly and be decorative. She turned toward the house, but William caught her hand. I don't know how to do this, he said quietly. Any of this. I don't know how to be a husband. I don't know how to... He looked at her stomach, something like panic flashing across his face. I don't know how to be a father. It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to her. I don't know how to do this either, Victoria admitted. But at least I'm trying. You just disappear. Every day you disappear, and I'm left alone in this beautiful prison wondering if this is what the rest of my life looks like. What do you want from me? I want you to come home, not to the house, home. I want you to have a conversation with me that isn't about schedules or contracts or business. I want... She trailed off because what she wanted felt impossible. I want to matter, even just a little bit. William's thumb brushed against her wrist, right over her pulse point. His eyes were dark, unreadable in the dim light from the mansion. You matter, he said finally. You matter more than you should. That's the problem. Before she could ask what he meant, he was gone, striding into the house and disappearing up the stairs to his wing. Victoria stood alone in the driveway, hand pressed against her still flat stomach, trying to understand what had just happened. You matter more than you should. What the hell did that mean? Inside, Maria was waiting with warm milk and a sympathetic expression. Long night? Long life, Victoria corrected, accepting the cup. Maria, can I ask you something? Of course. How long have you worked for the Giordano family? 23 years. I started when Mr. Giordano's mother was still alive. What was he like? Before? Maria's expression softened. Lighter. He smiled more. His mother's death changed him. She was killed in crossfire during a territory dispute when he was 15. After that, his father trained him to be what he needed to be. Hard, controlled, dangerous when necessary. And now? Now he's the head of one of the most powerful families in New York. Maria squeezed her shoulder gently. But he's also a man who hasn't figured out how to be anything else. Victoria went to bed alone, as always. but couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the conversation, William's expression when she told him about the pregnancy, the way his hand had trembled slightly against her wrist. You matter more than you should. Around 3 a.m., she heard footsteps in the hallway. They paused outside her door. Victoria held her breath waiting, but they moved on. And she realized with a sinking feeling that this was her life now, waiting for a man who didn't know how to stay, carrying his child, trapped in a marriage that was legally binding but emotionally empty. 3 weeks married. A lifetime to go. Victoria discovered she was a morning person at exactly 6:47 a.m. when pregnancy nausea hit like a freight train. She barely made it to the bathroom before losing last night's dinner. When she finally emerged, shaky and miserable, William was standing in her bedroom doorway. He looked startled. She looked like death. I heard. He stopped, seeming unsure. Are you all right? Morning sickness. Apparently it's not just a morning thing. Victoria wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. What are you doing here? I thought you'd left hours ago. I was about to. He shifted his weight, uncomfortable in a way she'd never seen. Do you need anything? Should I call Dr. Chen? It's normal. The doctor warned me. Victoria moved past him to sit on the edge of her bed. You can go. I'm fine. But he didn't leave. Instead, William walked to her bathroom, and she heard water running. He returned with a cool washcloth and a glass of water. Here. He offered both, then actually sat, beside her on the bed. My mother had terrible morning sickness with my sister. She said cold water and saltines helped. Victoria took the water, shocked into silence. This was the most domestic interaction they'd ever had. You have a sister? Had. Elena. She died with my mother. His voice was flat, but his jaw was tight. She was 12. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago, but clearly not long enough, based on how carefully he wasn't looking at her. They sat in silence for a moment, the morning light turning everything soft and golden. William's phone buzzed repeatedly in his pocket, but he ignored it. You should go, Victoria said finally. Whatever's blowing up your phone sounds important. It's always important, that's the problem. He stood, but didn't immediately leave. I'll have Maria stock your bathroom with ginger tea and crackers, and I'll try to be home for dinner tonight. You don't have to. I want to. He paused at the doorway. We should talk. About the baby. About everything. Then he was gone, leaving Victoria staring after him in confusion. The day passed in a blur of nausea and restless energy. Victoria tried reading, tried watching television, tried anything to distract herself from the fact that her entire life had become waiting. Waiting to feel better. Waiting for William to come home. Waiting for this marriage to become something real, or to finally accept that it never would. Around noon, a delivery arrived. A massive arrangement of peonies, her favorite flower. She'd mentioned it once in passing, weeks ago during one of their 3-minute conversations. The card read, for the nausea. And because you should have flowers. BW Victoria pressed her fingers against her eyes, refusing to cry over something as simple as flowers. But they were her favorite. He'd remembered. Maria appeared with lunch, plain rice and broth, perfect for her unsettled stomach. Mr. Giordano called. He said to make sure you ate something light. He called about my lunch. He's called 3 times today. Maria's smile was knowing. Checking on you. Victoria didn't know what to do with that information. True to his word, William came home at 7. Not midnight, not dawn, actual dinner time. He found Victoria in the library, curled up with a book she wasn't really reading. Hey, he looked almost nervous. How are you feeling? Better. The nausea comes in waves. She closed the book. You really came home? I said I would. You say a lot of things. Fair hit. William absorbed it with a slight nod. Can we talk? Somewhere more comfortable than that stuffy dining room? They ended up in a smaller sitting room Victoria hadn't even known existed. Clearly William's actual space, with lived-in furniture and actual personality. Books on the shelves that had been read, not just displayed. A half-finished glass of whiskey on the side table. Photos on the mantel. Victoria moved closer to the photos. A woman with William's eyes and a kind smile. A young girl with dark pigtails. William himself, maybe 15, looking so much younger and lighter than the man beside her now. Your mother and sister? And my father. He pointed to a stern-looking man in the background. 3 months before the shooting. What happened? If you don't mind me asking. William poured himself a drink, then seemed to think better of it and set it down untouched. Territory dispute with the Marconi family. My mother and Elena were leaving the ballet. Wrong place, wrong time. The shooters were aiming for my father's car, but he shrugged, but the gesture was anything but casual. Collateral damage. That's horrible. That's the life. He looked at her then. Really looked at her. That's what you married into, Victoria. This world where your family gets killed because of business disputes. Where children are collateral damage. Where marriages are arranged like corporate mergers because it's the only way to maintain peace. Is that what this is? Peace? Our marriage ended a 40-year conflict between the Morgan and Giordano families. Your grandfather killed my uncle in 1984. My father retaliated by taking over 3 of your family's shipping routes. It escalated for decades. William moved to the window, staring out at the grounds. Our fathers arranged this marriage as a truce. Your bloodline and mine, combined in a child who has claim to both territories. So I'm not just producing an heir. I'm producing a peace treaty. Yes. He turned back to her. And that child, our child, will have a target on their back from day one. Rival families who don't want the alliance. Traditionalists who think the old conflicts should continue. People who would use a baby as leverage. Victoria's hand instinctively moved to her stomach. You're trying to scare me. I'm trying to be honest with you. He crossed the room, stopping just in front of her. I've been avoiding you because I don't know how to reconcile what I feel with what I need to do. I need to keep you safe. That means distance. It means you can't be seen as important to me, can't be a vulnerability someone could exploit. What you feel. William's jaw worked. I didn't expect to care about you. That wasn't part of the arrangement. But then you showed up at that altar looking terrified but trying so hard to be brave, and He stopped, frustrated with his own words. I don't do caring, I do business, I do strategy. Caring gets people killed in this world. So you pushed me away. So I tried to. He ran a hand through his hair. Clearly, I'm not doing a great job of it considering I've called Maria 3 times today to check on your nausea. Despite everything, Victoria almost smiled. You called 3 times? 4. But who's counting? He moved closer, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. I don't know how to be a good husband, Victoria. I don't know how to be a father. All I know is how to be what my father trained me to be, hard, controlled, dangerous. But I'm trying to figure out how to be something else. For you, for the baby. You don't have to figure it out alone. Victoria reached for his hand tentatively. We could try figuring it out together. I don't want you to get hurt because of me. I'm already hurt. You leaving me alone for weeks hurt. You treating me like furniture hurt. You acting like I don't exist hurt. She squeezed his hand. Maybe actually being present and risking caring about me would hurt less. William looked down at their joined hands, like he was seeing something impossible. Then, slowly, he pulled her closer. Not forcefully, not with the controlled seduction of their wedding night, but carefully. Like she was something precious he was afraid of breaking. I'm not good at this, he warned. Neither am I. We can be bad at it together. He kissed her then, and it was different from before. Not performative, not dutiful, just real. Messy and uncertain and real. When they pulled apart, William rested his forehead against hers. I have to go to Chicago next week. 3 days business meetings I can't postpone. Victoria's heart sank. Oh, come with me. She pulled back to look at him. What? Come with me. The meetings are during the day, but we could have dinners together. Actually talk. Maybe see the city. He looked almost shy. If you want to. You want me to come? I want to try. Being married to you, not just legally bound to you. William's thumb brushed across her knuckles. If you're willing to give me another chance to not completely screw this up. Victoria thought about the past 3 weeks of loneliness. The mansion that felt like a prison. The marriage that felt like a death sentence. Then she thought about William checking on her nausea. The flowers. The way he'd opened up tonight, even though it clearly terrified him. Okay, she said. Chicago. But I have conditions. Name them. No more ghost husband routine. If you're going to be gone, you tell me. If you're struggling, you tell me. We try to actually be partners. Deal. He hesitated. Anything else? Move into this wing. Or I move into yours. I don't care which, but I'm tired of sleeping alone in that giant bed, wondering if you even remember I exist. Something vulnerable flashed across his face. You want to share a bedroom? I want to share a life, William. Even if it's complicated and dangerous, and not what either of us would have chosen. We're stuck with each other. We might as well try to make it bearable. Bearable. He smiled, small but genuine. That's romantic. I'll work up to romantic. Right now, I'll settle for present. William pulled her close again, and this time when his phone buzzed, he pulled it out and turned it off completely. Staying present, he murmured against her hair. Starting now. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't even close to perfect. But it was a beginning. And for the first time since saying I do, Victoria felt like maybe, just maybe, she hadn't completely lost herself in this arranged marriage. Maybe she was finding something else instead. Chicago never happened. 3 days before their scheduled trip, William kissed Victoria goodbye at 6 a.m., promised he'd be home for dinner, and disappeared into a nightmare. The first sign something was wrong came at noon when Maria looked worried. The second came at 3 p.m. when Victoria's new phone, the one only William and his security team had the number to, stayed ominously silent. By 6 p.m., Victoria knew. The kind of knowing that settles in your bones when you're married to a man in a dangerous world. The knowing that comes from watching too many crime shows during 8 years of boarding school isolation, and understanding exactly what silence means. Something had gone wrong. Mrs. Giordano, one of William's men, Anthony, the head of security, appeared in the library where Victoria had been pretending to read for hours. His face was carefully blank. I need you to come with me, now. Where's William? Ma'am, please, we need to move you to a secure location. Victoria's blood turned to ice. Where is my husband? Anthony's jaw tightened. There's been an incident. The Marconi family. He didn't get to finish. The windows exploded inward. Victoria hit the floor on instinct, arms covering her head as glass rained down. Anthony was on her in seconds, his body shielding hers as gunfire erupted from somewhere outside. Basement. Now. He dragged her up, practically carrying her as they ran through corridors Victoria barely recognized. More of William's men appeared, forming a protective wall around her. The basement was actually a panic room. Reinforced steel, surveillance monitors, enough supplies for a siege. Anthony shoved her inside where Maria was already waiting, pale but composed. What's happening? Victoria demanded. Where is William? The Marconi family hit one of our warehouses this morning, killed 3 of our men. Anthony was checking weapons with mechanical efficiency. Mr. Giordano retaliated. It escalated. Now they're coming for his family. His family. Victoria's hand moved to her stomach. Oh God. You'll be safe here. This room can withstand anything short of military-grade explosives. Anthony moved to the door. Stay inside. Don't open this for anyone except me or Mr. Giordano. If we're not back in 6 hours... 6 hours? Where are you going? To get your husband. The door sealed shut with a hiss of hydraulics. Victoria stared at the monitors showing the mansion grounds. At least a dozen armed men were surrounding the property. She could see William's security team engaging, She turned away before she could see anyone die. "How often does this happen?" she asked Maria, her voice surprisingly steady. "Not often. Not like this." Maria guided her to a bench. "The last time was when Mrs. Giordano was killed. Before that, I don't remember. 5 hours and 43 minutes. That's how long Victoria sat in that basement, watching monitors, counting her heartbeats, feeling every minute stretch into eternity. She learned things about herself in that basement, like how she could be absolutely terrified and completely furious at the same time. Like how pregnancy hormones made fear feel even more visceral. Like how easy it was to imagine worst-case scenarios when the man you'd just started to care about was somewhere being shot at. When the door finally opened, Victoria nearly screamed. William stood there and he was alive, but barely. Blood soaked through his shirt, his face was bruised, and he was leaning heavily on Anthony. "Oh my God." Victoria was across the room before she consciously decided to move. "You're hurt. It's not as bad as it looks." William's voice was rough. "Most of this isn't my blood." That didn't make it better. "We need to leave," Anthony said. "The mansion isn't secure anymore. They breached the perimeter. We have a safe house in Connecticut." "No." William straightened despite obvious pain. "We're not running. This is my home." "Sir, with all respect, your wife is pregnant. Your home just got shot up. We need to—" "I said no." William's voice was cold steel. "Get me the phone. I'm ending this tonight." What followed was the most terrifying display of controlled violence Victoria had ever witnessed. William, bleeding and furious, made 3 phone calls. She didn't hear what he said, but she heard the tone, the kind of tone that made hardened criminals nervous. 2 hours later, the mansion was secure. The Marconi family had retreated, and William had negotiated a meeting for the following day that would either end the conflict or start a war. Victoria didn't see him make any of it happen. She was ushered to a different wing, surrounded by guards, while William dealt with cleanup and strategy and all the dark business she'd married into, but never fully understood until tonight. It was 4 a.m. when he finally came to her, to their shared bedroom, since she'd moved into his wing 3 days ago. He looked like death. Exhausted, in pain, covered in bandages from the doctor who'd patched him up. "You should be sleeping," he said. "You should be in a hospital," Victoria countered. "How bad is it?" "Graze wound to my side. Bruised ribs. I've had worse." He started to undress mechanically, wincing with each movement. Victoria stood. "Let me help." "I've got it." "William." She moved closer. "Let me help." He stopped fighting. Let her carefully remove his shirt, revealing the bandages wrapping his torso. The bruises blooming across his ribs, the evidence of violence she'd only seen on television until tonight. "This is the life," he said quietly. "This is what I tried to warn you about. This is why I kept my distance. And look how well that worked out." Victoria's hands trembled slightly as she helped him sit. "They came for me anyway. Distance didn't keep me safe. If they'd gotten to you—" His voice cracked slightly. "If anything had happened to you or the baby. But it didn't. Your security did their job. Anthony did his job. You did yours." She sat beside him carefully. "We're all alive. This time. So what are you saying? That we go back to you avoiding me? That we pretend we're not married so maybe next time they won't target me?" Victoria turned his face toward her. "I'm already a target, William. I became a target the second I signed that marriage certificate. The second your baby started growing inside me. Distance doesn't change that. I can't lose you." The words came out raw. "I can't. I barely survived losing my mother and sister. If something happened to you because of me, then we make sure nothing happens. We be smart, we be careful. But we don't go back to being strangers living in the same house." Victoria's voice was firm. "I've spent 8 years being alone and isolated. I won't spend the rest of my life that way, even if it's supposedly for my own safety." William looked at her for a long moment. Then he pulled her closer, carefully, mindful of his injuries, and held her like she was the only solid thing in a world gone sideways. "I'm sorry," he whispered against her hair. "For tonight. For all of it. What happens tomorrow? At this meeting? I offer them a choice. Peace with terms they can live with or war they can't survive." His voice was cold when he talked about it. The Marconi family lost its head 3 years ago. The son who took over is ambitious but stupid. He thinks hitting us makes him look strong. I'm going to explain why he's wrong. And if he doesn't listen, then this gets much worse before it gets better. They sat in silence for a while. Victoria listening to William's heartbeat. William holding her like she might disappear. "I'm coming with you tomorrow," Victoria said finally. "Absolutely not. I'm coming with you. Not to the meeting, but to wherever you're going." She pulled back to look at him. "I'm not staying in this house wondering if you're coming back, not again. Not after tonight. Victoria, we're partners, remember? You said we'd try. That means I don't get left behind to worry." Her voice was steady despite her fear. "Besides, I'm part of this alliance. My presence might actually help. Show that the families are united." William studied her face, and she could see him calculating, weighing risks, trying to find an argument that would work. "You stay in the car," he said finally, "with Anthony and 3 other guards. The second anything looks wrong, they drive you straight to the Connecticut safe house. Deal. And you wear a vest. I'm pregnant. Does that even work? I'll have one custom fitted by morning." He wasn't joking. "This is non-negotiable, Victoria. You want to come? You follow security protocols exactly." "Okay." She helped him lie down carefully. "Now sleep. You look like you're about to pass out." "Probably will in about 30 seconds. His eyes were already closing. "Victoria?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for not running. Most people would have run after tonight." "I'm not most people." She settled beside him, careful not to jostle his injuries. "Besides, where would I go? This is my life now. Might as well face it head on." "That's either very brave or very stupid." "Can it be both?" He almost smiled. "Yeah, it can be both." William fell asleep within minutes, exhaustion and pain finally catching up to him. Victoria lay awake longer, listening to sirens in the distance, watching shadows on the ceiling, feeling their baby, barely the size of a grape, but somehow already changing everything, growing inside her. This was her life now. Bulletproof vests and panic rooms, negotiated truces and calculated violence. A husband who was equal parts dangerous and damaged, who killed people to protect his territory but held her like she was made of glass. It wasn't what she'd imagined marriage would be. But then again, she'd stopped imagining a normal life the day her parents signed her away at 10 years old. At least now she wasn't alone in the abnormality. At least now she was fighting for something, for someone worth fighting for. Victoria pressed her hand against her stomach and made a silent promise to the tiny cluster of cells growing there. "I will keep you safe, whatever it takes. Even in this dangerous, violent world, I will keep you safe." Outside, the sun started to rise on what would either be the day that ended the war or the day it truly began. The meeting location was neutral territory, a restaurant in Brooklyn owned by someone unaffiliated with any family. Victoria sat in the armored SUV outside, wearing a bulletproof vest that had indeed been custom-fitted overnight, watching William walk into what could be his death. He'd kissed her before leaving the car. Really kissed her, like he was memorizing the taste, just in case. "He'll be fine," Anthony said from the driver's seat, but his hand never left his weapon. "Mr. Giordano doesn't lose negotiations. There's a first time for everything." 23 minutes. That's how long William was inside. 23 minutes of Victoria counting her heartbeats, watching every exit, imagining worst-case scenarios that made her nauseous for reasons that had nothing to do with pregnancy. When William emerged, he was alone, unharmed, and on his phone. He slid into the car beside her. "Drive." Anthony didn't ask questions, just drove. "Well?" Victoria demanded once they were moving. "Marco Marconi is dead." William's voice was flat. His father, Giovanni, is taking back control of the family. He apologizes for his son's stupidity and has agreed to honor the original territorial agreements. Dead? You killed him? I didn't have to. Giovanni did it himself. In front of me. William looked out the window. Apparently Marco's ambitions were going to get everyone killed. His father decided one death was better than dozens. Victoria felt sick. He killed his own son. That's this world, Victoria. That's what we do to survive. William took her hand. Giovanni also sent a gift for you, a peace offering. He handed her a small box. Inside was an antique locket. Beautiful, obviously expensive, and somehow sad. It belonged to his wife, William explained. She died 10 years ago. He said every new mother should have something precious to pass down. His way of apologizing for endangering you and the baby. Victoria stared at the locket, at this strange gesture from a man who just killed his own child to maintain peace. I want to go home, she whispered. Already heading there. The mansion looked different in daylight. The broken windows were being replaced, the grounds being swept for evidence, staff moving with efficient purpose to erase last night's violence. Like it never happened. Except it had. I need to shower and make some calls, William said as they entered. Then I'm yours for the rest of the day, I promise. Okay. Victoria moved toward their bedroom, then stopped. William, thank you for coming back. His expression softened. Always. I'll always come back to you. Victoria woke to sunlight and the smell of coffee. She'd fallen asleep after her own shower, exhausted from fear and relief. Now William sat beside the bed, cleaned up and watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Hey, she mumbled. What time is it? Almost 3. You slept for 6 hours. He offered her the coffee. Decaf, with that vanilla creamer you like. She'd mentioned that once. He'd remembered. Victoria sat up, accepting the cup. Is it over? Really over? For now, Giovanni is old school. He honors agreements. His son was the problem, and that problem is solved. William's jaw tightened. But there will always be something else. Another family, another conflict. This life doesn't have permanent peace, just temporary truces. That's depressing. That's realistic. He moved to the window. Which is why we need to talk about the future. Your future. The baby's future. Dread pooled in Victoria's stomach. What do you mean? I mean, you have options. I can set you up somewhere safe. Change your identity. Give you enough money to live comfortably anywhere in the world. You could raise the baby away from all this violence. He turned to face her. You could be free. Free? Victoria set down the coffee. You're offering to let me go? I'm offering you a choice. Something you've never had. His voice was carefully controlled. Last night showed you what this life really is. I won't blame you if you want out. And the baby? Would be yours. I'd have no claim, no contact. You could tell them whatever you want about their father. The words clearly cost him. I'd rather have my child alive and safe with you than in danger because of me. Victoria stood, moving to face him. And what do you want, William? What I want isn't... What do you want? He was quiet for a long moment. I want you to stay. I want to figure out how to be a family, how to make this work. I want our child to know their father. His voice dropped. I want mornings like this where I watch you sleep and feel like maybe I'm not completely broken. But what I want doesn't matter if it gets you killed. What I want matters too, though. Right? Victoria stepped closer. I want to stay. I want to try. Yes, last night was terrifying. Yes, this life is dangerous, but running away doesn't guarantee safety. It just guarantees being alone again. She took his hand. I've been alone enough for one lifetime. You're sure? I'm sure I want to try. I'm sure I don't want to raise this baby wondering what if. She pressed his palm against her still flat stomach. I'm sure that despite everything, despite the violence and the danger and the absolutely insane circumstances, I'm starting to care about you, and I want to see where that goes." William pulled her close, and she felt him shaking slightly. "I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you. Probably not. But you're stuck with me anyway." Victoria looked up at him. "So what now? How do we do this?" Carefully, smartly. He kissed her forehead. "I'm increasing security, hiring people specifically for you and the baby. We're going to make this house actually feel like a home instead of a fortress. And I'm going to be here, really here, not just physically present, but actually trying. Trying sounds good. I'm also going to teach you self-defense and how to shoot." Victoria pulled back. "Excuse me? If you're staying in this life, you need to know how to protect yourself. I won't always be there." His expression was serious. "After the baby is born, we start training. Non-negotiable. You want to turn me into a mafia wife with a gun? I want to make sure if someone threatens you again, you can handle it until help arrives." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "This world is dangerous, Victoria, but it doesn't have to make you helpless." She thought about that. About being 10 years old and powerless. About 8 years in boarding school with no control. About last night, hiding in a basement while men with guns decided her fate. "Okay," she said. "Teach me." 6 months later, Victoria Giordano stood in the mansion's newly renovated nursery, her 8-month pregnant belly making it difficult to reach the crib she was trying to organize. "You're supposed to be resting," William said from the doorway. "I'm pregnant, not broken." She turned to face him. "Besides, Dr. Chen said light activity is good." Pretty sure she didn't mean furniture arrangement. He crossed the room, gently guiding her to the rocking chair. "That's what I'm for. You're supposed to be in a meeting." Postponed it. He knelt in front of her, hands on her belly. Wanted to be here for this. As if on cue, their daughter kicked, hard. William's face lit up the way it always did when he felt her move. 6 months ago, Victoria wouldn't have believed he could look that soft, that happy. "She's strong," he murmured. "She's your daughter. Of course she's strong." Victoria ran her fingers through his hair. "Have you thought more about names?" "I keep coming back to Elena, for my sister." He looked up at her. "If that's okay with you." Elena Giordano. Victoria tested it. "I like it." Elena Rose? Perfect. They sat like that for a while, feeling their daughter move, existing in one of those peaceful moments that felt stolen from a life that was anything but peaceful. The past 6 months hadn't been easy. Victoria had learned to shoot, learned the politics of their world, learned which families were allies and which were threats. She'd attended dinners and meetings, played her part as William's wife, and slowly built something that almost felt like power. She'd also learned that William Giordano, the cold, dangerous man she'd married, could be soft, that he had nightmares about losing her, that he'd secretly been setting aside money for Elena's future in case anything happened to them, that he was terrified of being a father but reading parenting books at 3 a.m. when he thought she was sleeping. They weren't perfect. They still argued. There were still nights when his world got dark and dangerous, and she had to wait, armed and protected, while he handled business she didn't want to know about. But they were trying, and that was enough. "Maria wants to throw a baby shower," Victoria said. "I told her that seems weird given the circumstances, but she's insistent. Let her. She's been planning it for weeks." William stood, helping Victoria up. "Speaking of which, a package came for you. From your mother." Victoria's expression shuddered. She'd spoken to her mother exactly twice since the wedding. Both conversations had been painfully awkward. The package contained a handmade baby blanket and a note. "I know I failed you. I hope you'll be a better mother than I was." "Mom, you okay?" William asked softly. "Yeah, I think I am." Victoria folded the blanket carefully. "I'm not going to be her. I'm not going to sacrifice our daughter for business deals or family alliances. Whatever Elena wants to be, whoever she wants to love, that's going to be her choice." "Agreed." William pulled her close. Though if she wants to marry a rival family's son just to spite us, I'm blaming you." Victoria laughed. "Fair enough." They stood in the nursery together, surrounded by soft colors and baby things, building a life neither of them had expected but both of them were fighting for. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was theirs. And that, Victoria had learned, was worth more than any fantasy. Outside, the sun set over Long Island, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. In the distance, the city continued its endless rhythm, dangerous and beautiful and absolutely unforgiving. But here, in this moment, in this room that smelled like fresh paint and hope, Victoria Giordano felt something she hadn't felt since she was 10 years old. She felt like she was finally home.